I think for me, those that do know or those that don't, I had a mental health episode when I was 24. And so not having any mental health in its most binary, how we speak to it, form. And it was not just my mental health, it was my physical, it was my emotional, everything about my body stopped. I really then had to relearn what that looked like and relearn the language.
I see it as effective communication. I think in the past, personally, I can think back to a time when I just kept saying yes at work, knowing that things are brewing up inside and not really knowing how to articulate the challenges I may be facing inside my mind, but then to not honor that and to just think of oh yeah, that's something that's not relevant to work, and just keep going, basically just led to me completely taking quite irresponsible actions at work because I just had to shut down.
Because I find I can't separate myself from the personal or professional. Both impact each other. In the professional, you would keep going, you would keep saying yes, you would keep pushing, although the personal was saying no. So it's how do you find that line of no in work that then impacts the yeses in the professional, not one without the other.
I think what I've learned from that is to kind of understand these signs and make it more preventative, and knowing that I have full right to disclose, when I have reached a limit, and disclose it to my peers or even to my manager, to be able to then go, okay, yeah, this is my limit, I'm going to work on this and then come back. So I think for me, professionally, I've learned that it is part of effective communication. Sometimes I think when we are overcome with emotions, we do sometimes, act in a slightly rational way. But then to be able to ground yourself first in taking the conversation in a different context where you feel completely held and supported, and then with that, bringing that to work, that has somehow worked for me so far.
What would you say have been some of the barriers or challenges, they could be external or internal, that you have faced in the past or currently face with obtaining positive mental health?
My race, my gender, the fact that I'm a parent, all of those identities as they intersect are so real and so rife in the world right now, and they all have different conversations. So sometimes I struggle with how do I show up in all of those conversations and which are the right ones to have and when to have them. And sometimes when do I let things slide? When do I let others be my voice for things? It's challenging having to be that example for the industry, but also for myself. I don't think it's ever going to go away, I'll be really honest, until the world changes outside to view Black women in a positive light, senior women in a positive light.
I'm born in a country where homosexuality is still illegal, and that in itself is just something I will always carry with me. And for a long time, I felt like acknowledging my queerness meant giving up on my relationship with my country. And I think for a child to carry that for a long time, that's quite a lot.
What do you think are some of the other factors that can impact the mental health of a queer leader?
When we've got real issues, the rise of Black Lives Matter 2 years ago following the death and murder of George Floyd really made me question how I navigate through space as a leader looking to support other people, but also as myself. And I think it changed how I lead and how I talk to people, because before it was very much in I'll be honest, it was very much in the people pleasing and kind of navigating through a lot of white spaces. And I found that in the last 2 years, that's not me leading as best as I possibly can if I'm not myself.
When queer leaders forget to take time for themselves, they block any capacity to firstly fully empathize, and also to discern what is most in alignment with where they are. Because I think not just for queer, just everyone, we are constantly overwhelmed, and this is something very specific to this generation where we just get information overload. And with that, I feel when queer leaders forget to rest, they really stop themselves from being able to advocate from a mental health perspective.
Oh my God, but if I'm quiet, then someone else is going to fill the space, and oh my God, I got to hold on to it so tight. But that comes from not talking to each other, right? Like when you said we don't know how to rest, but we also don't all talk to each other. And I feel like the more we talk to each other and actually share the load, then we'll actually have more things to rest. Like now, especially when we think about, you know, trans bodies, trans identities, non-binary, gender non-conforming, I feel like the community is actually now really starting to do what it should always have been doing, which is rallying around and carrying that voice together and not speaking on behalf of.
And I feel that's the essence of community care. You know, like when we talk about communication, I think it's such a two-way thing, and I think when we think of community care like that, it really is such a key element to mental health, I feel, because there's this immediacy to firstly learning to care beyond our own spaces, but also to be able to trust in the receiving.
You can't do it on your own, and I know personally where I've been really broken and felt like I'm on burnout at the edge of everything, to fall back in to community, those people who understand you, who see you even when I don't see myself, and uplift you, but also who hold you to account, right? The people that keep it real and 100 with you and tell you when you're not doing the right things, you need to come back to that. I no longer just want to survive, I want to thrive. That's how I see it and say it. And by that I mean to live with joy and to not live with struggle and pain, and that be the forefront of how I navigate through life. Leaning into the things that give me joy, working in the things that give me happiness, you know, even if there's struggle, actually doing it as a collective, like I said, it's a collective we, and pushing my community at the forefront of everything that I do.
Thriving for me means just no longer being in that fight or flight. I think oftentimes when you feel powerlessness, and you know, like there's no meaning whatever I do, that would be the opposite of thriving for me.
We will achieve that in the workplace by creating spaces where people can be their full self, where they can show up, where they understand what it truly means to thrive. You know, that's about creating safe spaces where, you know, people can speak to their identity, where they can share their dreams and aspirations and know that they will also be kept safe, but also where we can have these difficult conversations about what are the barriers to showing up, and then working together to try and dispel those.
I feel when approaching mental health within the workspace, often time is scarce, so we feel that, you know, there's no time or space for us to even check in on ourselves. But I think one thing that is useful to know is that checking in with yourself doesn't necessarily need to be an extensive thing to do. And it's also not a checklist. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to do this every day and it's going to necessarily work, because we change all the time. But one common practice that I've learned that seems to help a good number of people is just by finding contact. And I think within the workplace, when it comes to a very immediate occasion of, oh wow, I'm really suffering from panic attacks, or I'm feeling a dip, or any episodes that you might encounter, I always say finding your hands against even the wall, or a surface, even just on your thighs, feeling the ground. And just with that, it's always a nice way to anchor yourself back to balance. So to do this practice, simply find a comfortable seat, or if you're standing and have nowhere to sit, simply find yourself against a surface like a wall, even if it means a restroom, just a wall, and bring your hands onto a surface, whether it's the surface of your body or the ground, the wall, and soften your gaze. Allow your eyes to rest, giving it time to understand that they no longer need to look for anything. They can just be resting. And then focus on the way your palms, your feet are touching your surfaces of choice. Notice the temperature, the texture. And if you're a visualizer, you can also imagine the shape of your imprint against the surface. Now, if you have a little bit of time, you can also visualize this imprint changing upon every inhale and exhale, and how through every breath the imprints may soften, and every out breath the imprint may deepen. And a good rule of thumb is perhaps 5 long breaths, whatever long is in your definition. And upon the end of your 5 breaths, slowly blink open your eyes, soft swallow down the throat, and we're good to go.
You're making it nice.